One of the topics in combat that has been sort of a consistent issue, questions often arise about within our D&D group, is the concept of attacks of opportunity, or they've now been renamed just opportunity attacks in 5th edition. But the question is, what is an attack of opportunity? When does it occur, or what provokes an attack of opportunity, and what can be done by a player to prevent an attack of opportunity, or by an NPC for that matter, as attacks of opportunity go in both directions. What we have here is just a very simple scenario map that I've thrown up, where we have some player characters and we have some NPCs, some gnolls that are going to engage in combat. And let's consider a scenario here. I'm just going to bring one of these gnolls forward here, and let's imagine that through the course of combat, that gnoll ends up getting entirely surrounded by player characters. So he's got one on all four sides, and I'm going to draw a square here, which shows the reach of the gnoll. And drawing tools are a little finicky, so let me get this into place. Okay, so now there is a square all the way around the gnoll. These squares are 5 feet each, so it perfectly represents sort of the immediate area of a creature. And thus, if you draw a box that's 1 square larger in diameter all the way around, that is the reach of the gnoll. He has 5 feet of reach in any direction, so he can hit anything within this box without moving, right? So this also applies to attacks of opportunity. So let me go ahead and turn this gnoll such that he is facing northward there, and I've got him completely surrounded by player characters. So the question then is, when does an attack of opportunity occur if a PC wants to move? And the answer is found in the PHP, and I don't have a whole lot of drawing tools, so let me just draw a straight line here. So imagine that this arrow is a straight line drawn through the middle of the gnoll, and this dictates more or less, and there's no definitive rule on this, but more or less what his area of sight is. Because the rule for an attack of opportunity is that whenever a PC steps out of the reach of a creature, an attacking creature, he provokes an attack of opportunity if that creature has line of sight to him. So two checks, 2 qualifications. A, you have to start within the big red box here. You have to be within reach of the creature. And of course, this box is larger for large or larger creatures, large size or larger. And it's also larger for creatures that for some reason have reach greater than 5 feet. For instance, if the gnoll is using a lance, he would have a 10-foot reach in any direction, albeit at the cost of a penalty to hit those within a 5-foot range. So for most of your creatures, you're going to have this range. So qualification 1, is the person in the box within reach of the gnoll? And number 2, can the gnoll see them? So there's no definitive answer to this yet, and I suspect that we may get some clarification from Wizards in a future source book. But the way I play this and what makes sense to me is that if I draw this line through the middle of the gnoll, he has effectively sight within a 180 degree semicircle. So drawing a line essentially through the middle of his head out in either direction and then all the way forward. If I could draw a semicircle there, I certainly would, but unfortunately that's not an option here in Fantasy Grounds. But so he's got all this area in front of him. What that means is that if the guy right here, if he moves out of the range, he would provoke an attack of opportunity, as would the 2 characters on either side. However, this individual in the back, if he were to move back, would not provoke an attack of opportunity, because even though he is within range, he is not within sight of the gnoll, as he's standing directly behind the gnoll. Now, what can you do to prevent an attack of opportunity? Let's say this guy up here, he's our cleric. Let's say he needs to come over and heal somebody. In fact, tell you what, we'll just go ahead and put the wizard over here. So the wizard is hurting. He needs to get over and do a Cure Wounds, which is a touch action, right? So he needs to move to the wizard to do that. But he's currently fighting the gnoll. So how does he get over to the wizard? The answer is that he has 2 options. Number 1, he can just go straight on over and provoke an attack of opportunity when he exits the gnoll's range. and that means that he would get hit. And since at the moment I have level 1 creatures, these he's pretty squishy, right? He's only got 11 hit points, so he may not want to do that. The second option is that he could take effectively 2 rounds to get over and cast the healing spell on the wizard. And so what he would potentially do then is disengage. A disengage action is described on page 192 of the player's handbook, and it's one sentence. So I'm going to read this because it's not terribly intuitive. It says, if you take the disengage action, your movement doesn't provoke opportunity attacks for the rest of the turn, which is that last part is the part that kind of threw me off. And I was actually running this incorrectly, and none of my players even caught it until I started researching this. So what that means is, let's change the scenario up a little bit. Let's say there's a null right here as well. My assumption was that if this player were to disengage from the null as his primary action, if he were to just make a straight line over here, he's going to pass in the circle or the reachable range of this second null over here, the one labeled number 1. So he would then provoke an attack of opportunity, I thought, from this second null, and thus he would actually have to sort of, kind of move out a little bit to get over. In this case, it wouldn't even make a difference. But in some cases, that certainly would, particularly if the nulls were sort of spread out here. But according to the way that the PHB says disengage works, when you disengage, you're effectively immune to attacks of opportunity for the rest of your turn. So he could come up here and just kind of go any way he wants, circling around everybody, and get over to the wizard. And of course, he would have burned his action on disengage, would have to wait to the next round to be able to cast that spell, unless he's got some sort of free action he can use or something. So that's it. That's attacks of opportunity in a nutshell. If you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the comments, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you.